It started in my first apartment off campus, a cramped, dimly lit studio nestled above a thrift store that always smelled of old books and dust, a scent that would later seep into my dreams. The place was a steal, which should have been the first warning, but at 19 and hemorrhaging student loan money, a quiet room under a slanted roof felt like a sanctuary. The settling noises were the orchestra of my new independence. The groans of ancient timber contracting in the night cold. The sharp, rhythmic clicks of the baseboard heaters like beetle shells splitting. The distant, watery gurgle of pipes within the walls speaking a language of their own. I learned to sleep through the chorus, to fold these sounds into the narrative of a lived-in space. But then the cadence changed, subtly at first, a shift in the rhythm that pricked at the primitive part of my brain. It wasn't random anymore, it was a conversation. I'd drop a heavy textbook on the floor after a late study session, the thud echoing in the silence, and a heartbeat later, a distinct, solitary answering thump would resonate from the depths of the empty spare room, a room that held only a single sheet-draped chair. This wasn't a creak of settling wood. It was a mimic, a deliberate impact of similar weight and tone. I'd sigh in frustration, muttering, "Just shut up," to the oppressive quiet after a 3M essay crisis, and from a narrow galley kitchen would come a soft, metallic tap-tap-tap, a perfect triplet, as if a fingernail were gently rapping the oven door. A chill would skate down my spine, but I'd drown it in rationale. The house was old, I was stressed, it was just the acoustics of a strange building playing tricks. The silence between these events grew heavier, a thick velvet curtain waiting to be pulled back. The air itself felt watchful, stagnant, and cold in patches that had no business being cold, like passing through invisible, frigid pools in the hallway. The final straw, the thing that shattered my comfortable rationalizations, was the whispering. Not the white noise hiss of a faulty vent, but a faint, wet vocal susurration, the sound of lips and tongue moving with purpose, but without clarity, as if someone were trying to speak with a mouth full of damp cotton wool. It always emanated from just behind the bathroom door, a space that felt smaller, darker than it should. I'd fling the door open, my heart a trapped bird against my ribs, to be met with nothing but the dripping tap and my own pale, wide-eyed reflection in the mirror, the cold air smelling faintly of mildewed cloth. I told my friend Mark about it during a study session, laughing it off as sleep deprivation and caffeine psychosis. He laughed with me, a nervous, brittle sound. But his eyes, those honest blue eyes, kept darting over my shoulder toward the dark mouth of the hallway, as if tracking something I couldn't see. Later that night, after he'd left with a hurried goodbye, I heard the distinct, heavy clunk of the front door deadbolt turning, the squeak of hinges, then the solid thud of it closing. Then his voice, muffled and strangely strained, called out from a living room, "Hey man, forgot my phone." A wave of both irritation and relief washed over me. I walked out of my bedroom saying, "Dude, you scared the sentence died in my throat." The living room was a tableau of empty shadows, the only light the street lamp glow bleeding through the blinds. My own phone buzzed violently on the coffee table, making me jump. The screen, illuminated with a text from Mark, "Made it home. That place gives me the creeps, man. Get some sleep." The blood in my veins turned to slurry, a slow, cold ooze. I stood there, utterly paralyzed, staring into the dark hallway from where his voice, that perfect, familiar imitation, had come. The entity wasn't just responding, it was learning, adapting, using what it observed to weave itself into my reality. From then on, the noises graduated into forms. The familiar settling of the house mutated into the soft, shuffling drag of feet on the carpeted runner outside my bedroom door, a sound that would pause right at the threshold, as if someone were standing there, listening to my ragged breathing. The innocuous gurgle of pipes in the wall, behind my headboard, became a low, congested, wet breathing synchronized with my own inhalations until I'd hold my breath, my lungs burning, to hear it continue on without me. I stopped sleeping, existing instead in a twilight state of perpetual, prickling dread, jumping at the sigh of the wind, the creak of my own floorboards under my weight. Desperation, that bleak motivator, led me to start talking to the silence, pleading into the gloom. "Please," I'd whisper, my voice cracking, "just leave me alone. I'm just trying to live here." That's when the movement started. the graduation from auditory to visual terror. In the periphery of my vision, a shadow would detach itself from the others, a darkness peeling away from the darkness of a coat hanging on a hook, or the space between a bookshelf and the wall. It would linger, a tall, impossibly thin silhouette of a man, his outline jagged and wrong, with an unnaturally elongated neck that seemed to list to one side. I'd snap my head toward it, and it would be gone, but the impression remained, a retinal burn of malevolent shape that polluted my sight for minutes after. The final night I broke. I was boiling water for ramen at 2 in the morning, my back to the kitchen entrance, the fluorescent light flickering overhead, casting a sickly pallor. I felt that familiar, icy stillness descend, a bubble of absolute zero forming around me. The gentle bubbling of the water in the pot was the only sound in the universe. Then a warm, moist breath gusted against the bare skin at the back of my neck, carrying with it a visceral scent of damp cellar earth, stale linen, and something sweetly putrid underneath. I froze, my muscles locking, a silent scream trapped behind my teeth. From right beside my ear, so close I could feel the vibration in the air, the wet, whispering voice I'd heard through the bathroom door spoke, clear as a bell and dripping with a terrible intimacy. I'm not alone. I spun, a wordless cry tearing from my throat, my elbow knocking the pot off the burner. Scalding water and noodles splashed across the linoleum, hissing. The kitchen was empty. But on the fogged-up window above the sink, a single word was slowly dripping, the letters crude and large, as if traced from the outside by a fingertip moving through the condensation. Stay. I didn't. I ran. I left everything, textbooks, clothes, my security deposit, becoming a ghost in that space myself, fleeing to sleep on Mark's couch for a week, jumping at every sound in his modern, silent apartment. A month later, driven by a morbid, clawing need for closure, I looked up the address in the university's digital archives of local news. The search yielded a single, chilling microfiche clipping from November 1978. A reclusive man, a former tailor, had lived and died in that apartment. The article described him as extremely tall and thin, with a severe spinal deformity that caused his head to tilt permanently. He hadn't been found for weeks after his death in the height of summer. The cause was listed as asphyxiation. The brief police report, which I read with a numb horror, noted he was discovered seated at his kitchen table, a tea towel crammed deep into his throat, his long fingers curled around the edges of the wood, as if in a final, desperate grip. The house hadn't been settling. It had been digesting. It had been savoring the lingering resonance of a lonely, traumatic death, and in my own loneliness, it had tried to weave me into its endless, suffocating silence, to make me a part of its foundation, another creak in its timeless, hungry anatomy. We bought the house on Elmwood Drive because it was a steal, a pristine mid-century ranch with a huge backyard perfect for our dog, Milo, a goofy golden retriever who lived for chasing squirrels. The inspector, a guy with coffee on his breath and a weary look in his eyes, said it was solid, just typical settling noises for a house its age, and we nodded, thinking of charming old house quirks, not warnings. For the first year, it was paradise. Then, the sounds began. Not the groans of wood, but the sound of something rolling. A slow, heavy, wooden rumble thump that would travel the length of the attic floor directly above our bedroom ceiling, always around 3:17 a.m., a time I came to know with a sick, precise dread. I'd lie there, my wife Sarah breathing softly beside me, and listen to it traverse from the far end over the guest room to stop with a final dull thud right above our heads. I'd nudge her, my voice a dry croak. "Do you hear that?" She'd murmur, half asleep, "It's just the house settling, honey. An old pipe rolling in a duct or something." But pipes don't roll with that weight, that deliberate trajectory. I started going up there during the day, pulling down the creaky folding ladder, the air that poured down smelling of dried insulation and heat-baked dust. It was empty, save for a single forgotten item in the far corner, nestled in a nest of pink fiberglass, an old hand-carved wooden bowling ball, its surface stained dark with age and sweat, its finger holes worn smooth and deep. It felt unnaturally cold to the touch, a cold that bit into my palm, even in the summer heat of the sealed attic. I left it there, telling myself it was a piece of the house's history, a relic to be respectful of. That was my first mistake. The noises got worse. The solitary rumble thump became a frantic back-and-forth rolling, a rapid thumpa-thumpa-thumpa that sounded like a child bowling in a frenzied, joyous game in the dead of night. Milo would wake from his bed in the corner of our room, his hackles raised into a stiff ridge along his spine, a low, continuous growl boiling in his throat as he stared, unblinking, at the ceiling. Then the whisper started. Not in the attic, but in the air vents. A child's voice, faint and tinny, as if broadcast from a great distance through an old radio. It would chant nursery rhymes, but the words were always slightly off, tilted into something sinister. Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down, it would sing-song, and on the word down, a tremendous crash would shake the house, making the windows rattle in their frames, as if something massively heavy had been dropped from the attic rafters onto the floor. Sarah finally heard it one night, the voice in the crash, and she screamed, a raw sound of pure terror that sent Milo into a barking fit. We called a priest, a kind old man who walked through every room, sprinkling holy water and murmuring prayers. He blessed the house, but he also looked tired, and he said quietly at the door, sometimes things attach themselves to objects, not places. Look for what doesn't belong. The whispers stopped for a week. The rolling did not. It got louder, more aggressive. A violent game played over our heads. One afternoon, Sarah was gardening in the backyard, kneeling in the dirt, her hands coated in soil. I was in the kitchen making lemonade when I heard it. The sharp, splintering crack of the attic access panel in the hallway ceiling being shoved open from above. I dropped the spoon, my blood running cold. I looked out into the hallway to see the wooden bowling ball drop onto the carpet with a solid, final thud. It lay there for a heartbeat. Then, impossibly, against all physics of the flat floor, it began to roll. It didn't just drift, it rolled with purpose, with guided momentum, down the hallway, making a beeline for the back door. It moved with a sinister, sentient control, not following the floor slope, but carving its own path. It rolled right through the mudroom, bumped against the dog door, and with a scrape and a thump, pushed its way out into the yard. I watched, paralyzed, from the window over the sink. The ball, this dark, spherical piece of malevolence, curved across the sun-dappled lawn, straight toward Sarah, who was humming to herself, her back to the house, completely exposed. Milo, who had been sunning himself on the patio, saw it. He erupted in hysterical, fear-laced barks and lunged, a streak of golden fur, intercepting the ball just before it could strike Sarah's heel. He batted it away with his paws, a desperate, brave swipe, and the ball veered off, coming to a stop against the base of the old oak tree. Sarah, oblivious, turned and laughed, wiping her forehead. Silly dog, playing with the ball. She didn't see the way Milo stood between her and the tree, his body rigid, his lips pulled back in a silent snarl at the inert wooden sphere. That night, the voice in the vent returned, but it was no longer a whisper. It was a clear, cold, and seething child's voice, dripping with a petulant, ancient anger. You took my friend. I want a new one. The words echoed in the metal duct, hanging in the air. The next day, Milo vanished. We searched for hours, called his name until our voices were raw, checked with neighbors, drove the streets. As dusk fell, painting the house in long, guilty shadows, I heard a faint, familiar scratching from the attic. Not a rolling, a scratching, like claws on wood. I pulled down the ladder, my heart a hammer against my ribs, a flashlight in my trembling hand. The beam cut through the dusty gloom. There, in the exact center of the attic floor, as if placed on an altar, was Milo's favorite chewed-up green tennis ball. And right beside it, sitting perfectly, terrifyingly still, was the wooden bowling ball. As I watched, my breath caught in my throat. One of its 3 dark finger holes slowly, deliberately, swiveled to point directly at me. The hole stared, a blind, hungry eye. We moved out that weekend, leaving behind furniture, deposits, any sense of peace we'd ever had. The new family, a young couple with a boy of about 7, moved in a month later. I drive by sometimes a masochistic loop I can't break. I see the boy sometimes, playing alone in that big backyard. Last week, I swear I saw him pause his game of catch with himself, tilt his head as if listening to a friend I couldn't see, then look up at the house, a bright smile on his face, and wave eagerly at the attic window. The window was empty, just a dark square of glass. But from where I stood, parked down the street with my engine off and my hands cold on the wheel, it looked for all the world like he was waving at someone. And the way his arm moved, it wasn't a casual wave. It was the specific overhand arc of someone rolling a large, heavy ball back to a waiting player. It wasn't a ghost. That's what I have to keep telling myself, over and over, a mantra to ward off the memories that chew at the edges of my thoughts. It was worse. After college, I moved into a shared house with 3 other guys, a typical student dump on the wrong side of town with sticky floors, questionable stains on the ceiling, and a symphony of noises you just learn to accept. The worst, though, the one that never quite faded into the background, was the sound from the walls beside my bed. Not knocking, not scratching, chewing. A soft, wet, methodical grinding, a crunch-munch-swallow rhythm that would start just after midnight and sometimes go on for hours. It came from inside the cavity of the wall I shared with my roommate Leo, right behind my headboard. It sounded like something gnawing patiently on the drywall, the wooden studs, the electrical wires, consuming the very bones of the house. Leo, a laid-back bio major, was a sound sleeper. I'd bang on the wall. The chewing would stop for a minute, then resume. In the morning, over burnt toast, I'd ask him, "Dude, you hear that last night? That chewing?" He'd just yawn, his eyes bleary. "It's just the house settling, man. Probably squirrels or rats in the walls. Old place." It sounded logical. We set traps, little metal snapjaws baited with peanut butter, sliding them into the gaps in the basement foundation. They remained empty, springs untouched, the peanut butter drying into crusty beads, but the chewing didn't stop. It got closer. I'd press my ear to the cool plaster in the dark and hear it right on the other side, not a foot from my face, that persistent, hungry sound. It would stop the moment I tapped the wall, a listening pause, then cautiously begin again, a little louder, a little wetter. Then the smells began. A week after the chewing started, a new odor seeped into the room, cutting through the usual stench of dirty laundry and old pizza. It was sweet, cloyingly, so like rotting fruit, but underneath was a sharp, coppery tang, like a handful of pennies and old meat. It was strongest near the air vent, a greasy, sickening smell that seemed to coat the back of your throat. We blamed it on a dead animal in the ductwork, a possum or a raccoon that had crawled in and expired. The landlord, a disinterested man who only communicated via terse texts, sent a guy who poked his head in the crawl space, declared it clear, and left. The smell would fade for a day, then return, thicker, richer, more invasive. And Leo started changing. It was subtle at first. He became withdrawn, skipping the nightly video game sessions, claiming he was tired. His color was wrong, a pale, waxy pallor, like cheese left out of the fridge. Dark purple smudges bloomed under his eyes. He claimed he had a stomach bug that wouldn't quit, was always nauseous. The chewing in the wall, I noticed, became more frantic, more rhythmic, synchronized with Leo's periods of silence in his room. When his light was off and he was presumably sleeping, the gnawing was a constant, industrious sound. When he was moving around, it was quiet. One night, a Tuesday, I think, I got up to use the bathroom, my head fuzzy from a failed attempt at sleep. The hallway was dark, but Leo's door was ajar, a slice of deeper blackness. I saw him. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, perfectly still, silhouetted by the streetlight glow from his window. He was facing the wall, our shared wall, his posture rigid. He wasn't moving. He was just staring at it. "Leo," I whispered, my voice sandpaper. His head didn't turn, but his voice, dry and flat as dust, replied, "The house is hungry. It's teaching me how to eat." A jolt of pure, electric fear shot through me. I didn't reply. I just shut my door, locked it, a pointless gesture that felt monumentally important, and shoved my dresser in front of it, my heart slamming against my ribs. The next morning, he was his normal self, or a frighteningly good imitation of it. He was making coffee in the kitchen, humming. He blamed the night before on sleepwalking, on fever dreams from his bug. He looked me in the eye and laughed a hollow sound. I probably just had to pee, dude. Don't be so creepy. I almost believed him. The power of wanting things to be normal is a terrifying force. Later that day, needing a phone charger, I went into his room. He was at class. The smell hit me first, that sweet rot stench, now mixed with the odor of damp plaster and something else, something disturbingly organic, like a wet dog or a bog. The room was messy, but my eyes were drawn to the wall beside his bed, the one connected to mine. It looked different. In the gray afternoon light, it appeared to be covered in a strange, textured wallpaper, a matte, lumpy beige. I stepped closer, my sneakers sticking slightly to the floor. It wasn't wallpaper. It was a dense, layered crust of cobwebs, dust, clumps of gray insulation fibers, and hair. Light hair, dark hair, short, long. It was pulsing, very faintly, in and out, as if something large was breathing slowly behind it. My stomach turned to ice. I reached out, my hand trembling, and tore a piece of the crust away. It came off like a scab, stringy and resistant. Underneath, the drywall was gone. A ragged, damp hole, about the size of a dinner plate, tunneled into the darkness between the studs. The edges of the plaster were chewed away, not broken, but covered in hundreds of tiny, precise, arch bite marks. And the smell from that hole, that was the source. It was a breath, a warm, foul exhalation from the guts of the house. I stumbled back, gagging. I confronted Leo that night, my voice shaking with a mix of terror and rage. He was sitting on his bed, facing me, but his eyes were distant. He just smiled, a vacant, terrible stretching of his lips that didn't touch his dead fish eyes. You hear it too, don't you? The settling. He leaned forward, and his breath was the smell of the hole, a physical presence in the space between us. It's not the house. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. It's the thing the house is growing, and it's almost ready to be born. I packed a bag that minute and left, mumbling about a family emergency, my hand shaking so badly I could barely zip the duffel. I called the other two roommates, Jake and Phil, my words tumbling over each other in a panic. They thought I was having a breakdown, told me to calm down. 2 days later, my phone exploded with calls. It was Jake, his voice high and shattered, almost unintelligible. The police had been summoned. Leo was found in his room. He was alive, but catatonic, curled in a fetal position on the floor. The wall was gone. Not just the hole, a massive, gaping section of it had been chewed open, a jagged maw leading into a dripping, dark cavity. And Leo's mouth, they said his jaws were dislocated, stretched wide open in a silent, endless scream. His teeth cracked and worn down to nubs, like he'd been gnawing on concrete. He was curled around something, cradling it against his chest. The paramedics, hardened professionals, were reportedly visibly shaken. They pried it from his arms. It was a raw, hairless, blind thing, wet and newborn, its pink-gray skin shiny under the lights. It was the size of a large rat, but its shape was all wrong. No tail, stubby limbs that ended in little more than nubs, and a smooth, bulbous head. Its tiny mouth, lined with needle-like protrusions, was working open and shut with a soft, wet, chewing sound. They said it resembled a possum fetus, but it wasn't. It was something else. Leo is in a high-security psychiatric ward now. He doesn't speak. He just sits and stares at the wall of his cell, his dislocated jaws working slowly, endlessly, mimicking that same rhythmic gnawing. The other roommates moved out. The house stands empty, a black hole on that street. The landlord is trying to sell it. I saw the listing online. It says, spacious student rental. Needs some TLC. Minor settling issues. I drive by sometimes, drawn to the horror, like picking at a wound. The new for sale sign went up last week. This morning, in the dawn light, I saw it was already leaning at a sharp angle, as if the ground beneath it had softened, had become spongy, or as if something had been chewing on the wooden post from below, down there in the dark, damp earth, right where the house settles, right where it's always growing something new in the quiet, hungry dark.